All right, good morning, everybody. We are going to be covering Unit 4 today. I got a couple emails this week of some kiddos that needed help with some of the things in Unit 4. So if that's you, make sure you are taking good notes for yourself today. To do that, you can write on your own paper. You're totally welcome to do that. Or there is a ClassKit link in the chat box. Now that your unit tests do not have Lockdown Browser on them anymore, we will be using ClassKit a little bit more because you'll be able to go back and forth on your notes while you're taking your unit test. So the link up at the top of the chat box is a ClassKit copy of today's slides, which is going to be covering your Unit 4 test study guide. Also, just a little reminder, all of your study guides are bonus quizzes. And so this was a bonus quiz last Friday. So after today, if you take good notes, you can use your notes to go back and take that bonus quiz because the answers are the same. Questions and answers are the same. All right, let me see here. Also, another little reminder, I am writing on the slides in our live session. So what that means for you is once I move past one slide and go to the next one, it deletes everything from the previous slide. So you want to make sure that you're keeping up with me so that you don't miss anything, because once I move past it, it is gone forever. Are we going to go over the new unit for today? No. Talia, because we've only had one lesson and today's your first lesson in Unit 5. So no, we're going to be going over Unit 4. And also remember, you do have 2 attempts for your unit test. So if you've already taken your unit test and you didn't make a very good grade on it, if you take good notes today, you can use those and go back and use your extra second attempt to take it again. Okay, any questions before we get started? I am going to turn the chat box on. So if you would, where it says to staff, change that to say to room so that everybody can see your chats. And just make sure that while we're going over our lesson today, you are staying on topic. If you're not, Miss Johnson is here and she's very quick at deleting your off-topic chat. So if you see that your message was deleted, that's probably because it wasn't on topic. Yep, and now she's quick. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Go to slide 2 if you're in ClassKit with me. If not, you can just write number 1. Number 1 says, what is this fraction in decimal form? Somebody tell me in the chat box, how do we go from a fraction to a decimal? What do we need to do with those 2 numbers? Yes, very good, Talia. And you guys, just as a reminder, whatever I write in purple is what you need to write on your slides for notes. You can write more if you want to, but at the very least, write what I write. So for 5/8, you're going to take 5 and divide it by 8. Now, very important here, you have to go in order. If you type in 8 divided by 5, you're going to get the wrong answer. You have to go from top to bottom. So when you type that in, what do you guys get? And I'm going to drop a link in the chat box for an online calculator if you don't have one. Calculator. Very good, Christian. Bubba, yes, it would be 0.625. So pretty simple for the first one right there. It would be C. And guys, if you're taking the test, like for ACAP and you don't have a calculator for this, you would have to use long division. I'm not sure which part this is on. I want to say it's on the one where you do have a calculator, but if you don't, you'll have to use long division. Okay, any questions on number 1? And y'all get into the habit of circling your final answer on your notes really on everything that you do for math. It's just easier when you're looking back at your notes so that your eyes can go directly to your answer. And same thing for me. When I'm grading your TGAs, it's a lot easier for me when you have your answers circled. So I can just look at your answers, see that you did your work, and I'm just like, oh, yep, they got it right, and move on. If not, it can kind of get a little messy, especially in class kick. So just try to get into the habit of circling your final answer. All right, if there are no questions on slide 1, we'll move on. This is slide 3, question number 2. It's a true or false question. So it says the number below is not a repeating decimal. Well, let's look at the number. We have 0.345, and I see a little line above that 5. Does anybody remember what that line stands for? What does it mean if there's a line over a number in a decimal? Good, Kylie. Good, Kendall. It means any, and you can make this note if you didn't know, any digit that has a line over it is repeating. So for math, we use this so that we don't have to write out this long decimal, because if we wrote it out, it would actually look like 0.345555555555, and nobody wants to write that. So if it's repeating, we can note that by writing a little line above the digit. So this is a repeating decimal. That means that this is false because it says that it's not. Good, Christian, Talia, Kimball. Yes, Diana. Exactly. So make that little note. And you guys feel free on your own notes to use your text tool. The only time where you're not able to do that is when you're submitting something for math. So however you want to take your own notes is totally up to you. I do not care if you use the text tool. If you want to make it a little more neat, especially when it's just words. The only time you can't do that is for your TGAs. Kimball, yes. All right, about 10 more seconds. We're going to move on to slide 4. And y'all, if you missed anything today, this is being recorded. So feel free, about 30 minutes after this session ends, the recording will be posted. You can always go back and see what you missed. All right, moving on to slide 4. This is number 3. It says, on a cold day, the temperature in a certain city changed negative 34.08 degrees over 4.8 hours. What was the average change in the temperature per hour? Enter your answer as a decimal. So I want you to get your highlighter really quick and highlight that word average. Does anybody know what the word average tells us to do? What operation? What operation does it tell us to do? Yes, Kylie. So make a note on yours. You can use the text tool. Average means divide. In some form or fashion, when you're finding the average, you are going to be dividing at some point. Sometimes you have to add numbers together first and then divide by the total. For this one, we don't have to do that. We literally just divide. Okay, it wants the average change in temperature per 1 hour. We have a total of 4.8 hours, and then we have a total temperature change of negative 34.08. So we have our totals already. We literally just need to divide. So on yours, write negative 34.08, the bad decimal. Let's try it again. 0.08 divided by 4.8. And let's look at it before we do any math. We have a negative divided by a positive. Our signs are different, so that means our answer is going to be what? Very good. Yes, our answer is going to be negative. We can go ahead and write that, and that already eliminates 2 of our answers. Good, Kylie. You could also do it that way. And yes, it is negative 7.1 when you divide. Make sure you circle your answer.
Can we reiterate, like when you do long division for this, sometimes on the ACAP, that you can't divide when you're doing long division by the decimal on the outside?
Say that again.
When you're dividing, like, and you're doing the long division with the decimal on the outside, it has to be a whole number, correct?
Okay, yes. So yeah, if you don't have a calculator and you have to do it long division, remember your outside number always has to be a whole number. So to get 4.8 to be a whole number, you'd have to move this decimal to the right, and you would need to do the same thing underneath. So that becomes 48 divided by 340.8. And then you could divide from there. Is that what you're talking about, Ms. Johnson?
Yes, that's what I was talking about.
Cool. Yes. So depending on whether or not this is on the portion where you have a calculator, if you have a calculator, easy peasy. If you don't, you're going to have to do long division. So I'm going to separate the screen like this. And that's down there at the bottom. So on the outside of your long division tent, you have to move that decimal to the right until it makes it a whole number. And then however places you moved it on the outside, you have to move the decimal on the inside as well. The inside number does not have to be a whole number, but the outside does. So while y'all are writing that, I'll just make a little note here. This is with the calculator. This one is without a calculator. Good, Kylie. Why are we not learning Unit 5? Bethany, you are learning Unit 5. You should have started it today in the online platform. But since this is your first lesson today, it wouldn't really make sense for us to go over the whole unit because you haven't learned the whole unit yet. Carly, no, this class is not optional. The only time your class is optional is if you see the word optional or OPT in the title of the class, but I would say the majority of your classes are required. I think some of your afternoon like support sessions, some of those might be optional, but if it is, it'll say it in the title of the class. All right, let's move on. This is slide 5, number 4. It says Ryan has a bank account balance of negative 14.43, which means he went below zero. He spent too much money. As soon as he realizes this, he deposits $36.40 into the account. What is Ryan's bank account balance after the deposit is made? So before we do any math, I want to kind of give you a visual. Okay, so his bank account started at $0, right? Everybody's does. Then he spent, which means he went down, he spent negative $19.43. So his started at 0, he went down to 19.43. Then it says when he realized that, he deposited or put money in his account, which is positive. So now it's going to go up. That was a bad line. Up $36.40. So just based on that, will he have a positive amount of money in his account after he deposits that, or negative? What do y'all think? Good, Kylie, Talia. Yes. So our answer will definitely be positive. So we can mark these two out because they're negative. Okay. And then to find it exactly, Kylie, we know that the total cannot be 55 because he doesn't even deposit that much money. He was already in the negative. But if you didn't know that, you could just subtract the two numbers. So we could take 36.40 and subtract 19.43. If you don't have a calculator, you can do it the long way. So you can't take 3 away from 0. You would borrow, making that 3, this 10, giving you 7. You can't take 4 away from 3, so you got to borrow again. Lots of borrowing on this problem. And then 4 minus 13 is 9. Keep your decimal point. You can't take 9 away from 5, so you borrow yet again, making that 15. 9 from 15 is 6. And then 1 from 2 is just 1. So your final answer would be 16.97. Any questions on that one? So y'all, especially on the ACAP, there are definitely going to be some questions that you do not know how to do. That's kind of the purpose of the test. When that happens, try your best to use like your logic and reasoning skills to make sense of the problem, because usually you can narrow down your answer choices by like 50%. That way you can just choose between 2 answers instead of 4. That gives you a much better chance, better odds to get it correct. So even if you have no idea how to solve the problem, try to kind of reason it out, and that usually will help you. All right, about 10 more seconds before we move on. Yes, Kylie, that's fine. Christian, exactly, yes. All right, moving on. Gracie, we are in Classkick and we're on slide 6. The link's at the top of the chat box if you'd like to join us. All right, slide 6 is number 5. It says, what's the value of this expression when m equals 2 and n equals 3? The expression is -4 times m plus n squared. So let's highlight those important things. We'll highlight our expression, and we also want to highlight the variables and their values. So m equals 2 and n equals 3. I'll give you just a second to do that.
What slide number is this on Classkick?
6.
6. Okay, thank you.
All right, Once we have that highlighted, I'm going to go ahead and rewrite the problem up here. Gracie, that's up to you. This is to help you on your unit test that was yesterday. So depending on if you have taken it and what you made on it would be how to answer that question.
We also went over it yesterday in small group. So if you need to watch that recording or finish this recording after class, like you can go back and rewatch it. But we did do it in small group yesterday as well.
Yep. So Gracie, what did you make on your unit test? If you did well on it, I'd say no, probably not. If not, then yes. Okay, so anytime you have a problem like this where you see these variables, you want to plug in the value that they give you for the variables. So let's do that first. Let's copy down the -4, open the parentheses, and then m. Well, they told us that m equals 2, so I'm going to replace the m with a 2. Plus n, which they told us equals 3, so I'll replace the n with a 3, close parentheses, and put my little 2 up there. Now, for this problem, you're going to need to know the order of operations, so I'm just going to note that up here. PEMDAS, if you want to write that on yours, you can kind of mark it off as you go. So the first order of operations is parentheses. That's what that P stands for. Do we have any parentheses in this problem? Yes, we do. The 2 plus 3 is inside the parentheses. So that's what we're going to do first. What is 2 plus 3? Very good. 5. So we're going to keep that inside parentheses and then copy down the rest of the problem. So we didn't do anything with that -4. We didn't do anything with the 2 up at the top. Okay. Now, there's no more parentheses. We can kind of cross that P off and move to the next order of operations or the next operation. And that E stands for exponents. Do we have any exponents? Do we have any exponents? Remember, exponents are those little numbers that are up towards the top of your line. Yes, we do have an exponent. You see that little 2 that's above the kind of up to the right of the 5? That is an exponent. Okay, so now we're going to solve the exponent, which that 2 is squaring the number in front of it, which is 5. And anytime you're squaring a number or you see a 2, you're multiplying the number in the parentheses by itself. So 5 times 5 is what? Good, Mary, it is 25. So let's keep that in parentheses. And then copy down what we didn't use, which was the -4. Okay, we don't have any more exponents, so we can cross out that operation and move on to the next one. The next one is multiplication and division. And when we have a number outside of the parentheses, that is multiplication. So the last thing to do is multiply -4 times 25. We have a negative times a positive. Is that going to give us a negative or a positive answer? Negative, very good. And then 4 times 25 is what? Sorry, my dogs are going nuts. Piper. Yes, you guys are correct. It is -100. All right, any questions on that one? So you're just following the order of operations after you plug in the values that they give you in the expression. All right, moving on to slide 7. This is going to be number 6. It says which expression is equivalent to 10x minus 6. Now, this is using the commutative property, which tells us we can rearrange the order of our numbers. However, the most important thing here is you can change the order. You cannot change the value, which means you cannot change the signs. So what I like to do is look in the original expression and kind of put boxes around my original values. So my original value for 10 is positive 10x and then a negative 6. Okay, don't forget that negative sign. It appears as a minus sign in that expression, but it can go back and forth between negative and positive. I mean, between a negative sign and a minus sign. Okay, so when we rearrange the order of these values, we cannot change the 6 being a negative. We cannot change the 10 being a positive. So what is the only answer choice over there that keeps those digits in their original value? So the 10 has to stay positive, the 6 has to stay negative. What's the only answer choice that does that? It just changes the order. Nope, it's not B. B makes the 10x a negative. We can't change it to a negative. Good, Christian. Yes. A is the correct choice because it keeps the negative 6. It keeps the positive 10x. It just changes the order of them, basically swaps it. So on questions like these, where you're having to use that commutative property to change the order, just remember you cannot change the value of the original numbers. So if the original 10 is positive and the original 6 is negative, it has to stay that way even when you change the order. All right, let's move on to slide 8. This is slide 8, number 7. And I want you to get your highlighter tool for this one. It says combine the like terms to simplify the expression. I want you to highlight like terms. And then I'm going to rewrite the expression a little bit bigger so everybody can see it. So we've got 20x plus 15 plus 10x minus 25. Okay, so like terms tells us that we need to combine the numbers that have, so some numbers will have a variable attached to them, which is a letter, and some numbers will have nothing attached to them. Okay, so let's look at the terms that do have a variable attached to them first. Which numbers have a variable attached to them? Which numbers have a variable attached? Very good, Kendall. 20x and 10x, or plus 10x rather, have a variable x attached to them. So we're going to combine those two together first. So what is 20 plus 10? Good. It is 30, and you keep the variable. So it's 30x. And then what are the two numbers that do not have a variable attached to it at all? Close. Don't forget the sign on that second number. It is 15 and negative 25. So when we combine those, what would you get? So 15 minus 25. Very good. Minus 10. And that's your answer. It is D. Nope, that's a lie. It is B. B. Yep, 30x minus 10. Whoops. All right, moving on to slide number 9. This is question number 8, slide 9. It says simplify the expression using the distributive property. So highlight that for me, distributive property. And I'm going to rewrite the problem a little bigger so we can all see it up here. We've got 10 on the outside, and then inside the parentheses, we've got 5x minus 8. All right, so the distributive property tells us to distribute the number outside of the parentheses to both of the values inside the parentheses. Yes, Kylie, exactly. So we're going to take this 10, multiply it by 5x, and multiply it by negative 8. Okay, I'm going to make myself a little note that says multiply and then you guys tell me what you get. What is 10 times 5? 50. Good job. And since there's an x there, we keep that. So 10 times 5x is 50x. And then what is 10 times negative 8? Good, Christian. Negative 80. So we copy that down and we have simplified our problem using the distributive property. Our answer is 50x minus 80. So that would be D. Good job, Bentley, Diana, Talia, Christian. All right, moving on. This is slide 10. We've got 2 more. Slide 10, number 9. This question says, how can this expression be written another way? 112 plus 28m. Factor using the distributive property and the greatest common factor to write an equivalent expression. So, couple of ways you can solve this problem. If I'm being totally honest with you guys, when I see a problem like this, I don't factor. I look at the answers to kind of get a head start. Okay, and here's what I mean by that. You can totally factor out both of your numbers. So if you were to do that, you would write 112 and 28. Then you would list all of the factors for both of those numbers. Well, that takes a lot of time. If you kind of want to, I don't want to say cheat, but cheat a little bit, you can look at your answers and use the numbers that they give you to see if they work. So since we know, it tells us right here that we're going to have to use the distributive property. And remember from our previous question, what the distributive property form kind of looks like, right? There's usually a number on the outside and then a parentheses with two values on the inside. So let's look for answers that look like that. The only two I see that look like that are B and C, right? The other two, they don't have any way to distribute anything in those expressions. So we know those can't be right. So between B and C, you can kind of reverse work the problem out and see if it comes out to what your original problem was, which was 112 plus 28. Okay, so if we do that, let me show you what that looks like. If I take B, which is 28, open parentheses 4 plus M, and I use the distributive property. So 28 times 4, 28 times M. Y'all tell me what you would get. What's 28 times 4? (28 times 4). Good, Christian. It's 112. And then 28 times M is just 28M. So plus 28M. And look at that. It matches our original problem exactly. So that means that that has to be our answer. Okay. The other way you can totally do it, if you're somebody who likes factoring, I've never met somebody who likes to factor in my life. But if you're that person, feel free to list out those factors. And remember, factors are the numbers that divide the original number evenly. So you would start with 1 and go all the way up to the actual number. And then whichever they have in common, whichever one is the highest, is what you would factor by. It's just kind of a little workaround to use the answers that they provide you as a starting place. Let me delete that box. All right. We've got time for the last one, so I'll go over to the last slide. This is slide 11, number 10. This one doesn't really require any math. It just asks which expression represents how many days are in X weeks. So y'all tell me in the chat box, how many days are in 1 week? 7. So that's where that 7 is coming from. And then how would we find out, for example, if I said how many days are in 4 weeks? What would you need to do for that? Edward, that is the right answer, but how did you get that? Good, Kendall, to Leah, you would need to multiply. So that would be A. And you can check yourself if you want to by plugging in some numbers. So 7 times 4. So we replace the X with the 4. That would be 28 days in 4 weeks. If you wanted to know how many days were in 10 weeks, you could replace it with a 10. That would be 70, and so on. All right, so that is it. Couple of reminders. This is the study guide for Unit 4, so 4.12 unit test. This is the study guide for that test that you had Monday. Yes, Monday. It is also the bonus quiz that you had on Friday of last week. So if you would like to get a free, easy 10 bonus points, go on your calendar back to Friday, use your notes to take that quiz. They're the exact same questions and answers. Okay. Last reminder, these slides in ClassKick are not saved. So don't exit out of them until you're finished using them. Yep, Kylie, you're good. If you don't have any questions for me, you're good to go. I'll hang around for the next 4 minutes in case anybody has a question. But if not, I will see you guys later. Hope you have a great rest of your week. Bye. Oh, you're welcome, Kendall and Diana. Bye, y'all. Mary, yes, you can. If you don't need it for your test, if you've already taken it, then yeah, you can exit out of it. Bye, guys. Of course, Mary. Kimball, the test from yesterday is your TGA. This test was on Monday. Bye, Colin. Bye, Christian. Bye, Grayson. Bye, Talia. Carly, feel free to show it on your camera if they're still here. They can see you by clicking the class gallery. Bye, Kimball. Bentley, is that your Halloween costume? I love it. Okay, Carly, that's fine. Very cute. I love yellow. All right, guys, about 2 more minutes before it closes us out. Does anybody have